What the hell was that supposed to mean?
What the hell was what supposed to mean?
Manuel, where have you been? You've been gone for months now.
Yeah, and why are you dead?
Well... Animation, a medium that can be appreciated by all, no matter if it's two-dimensional, three-dimensional, or even done with clay. I've grown to adore and admire animation over the last couple of years. Well, this channel did expand to talk about more of the shit I personally want to talk about. I originally made this channel to express my love for animation. However, there is one genre I've somewhat been avoiding to both watch and talk about on this channel. That being anime. Now, I have nothing against anime itself. I completely understand why people like the genre. The problem is that every anime show that I've tried watching is just not really my thing. Like, My Hero Academia looks like a cool show with some really nice looking animation and character designs, but the first few episodes kind of F for me. Dragon Ball was never really a show that interested me as much, and Naruto is a good show. I've just not been bothered to finish watching it. But this last year, it's been a year where I finally stepped out of my comfort zone and watched some shows I wouldn't have watched beforehand. I watched the Harley Quinn Season 1 and Season 2 animated show, and found it being pretty fun. Breaking Bad was a mature and breathtaking show, and probably the show that has stuck with me the most is the anime Neon Genesis Evangelion. Neon Genesis Evangelion is what many consider to be one of, if not one of the most revolutionary and experimental animes to ever exist. An anime that has been interpreted in many ways and which people have tried to properly explain before. I have never seen such a piece of media that has had a cultural impact on many people, but for so many different reasons. At its core, Evangelion's main concept is easy to understand, but to properly understand its deeper meanings is a whole different story. Its ideas, symbolism, and themes are much harder to understand, even to the point of leaving many fans of this show, leading to the original series, End of Evangelion, or even the rebuilds confused. At first I heard of this show from my good friend Timothy Reviews, and my buddy Enlisted, and other than hearing that the show gets really dark, I completely went blind into this show, and I honestly think that this is the best way to first watch Evangelion. So if you're watching this video and have yet to see Evangelion, I highly recommend you do so. Before we head into this video was where we're going to get into major spoiler territories. And kind of just a general warning to my typical viewers, this won't be like any show I've talked about before. I will be talking about sensitive topics like sex, gore, and suicide, and so watch it at your own risk. With that being said, I will not head into this video saying, I know what Evangelion is truly about, or something like that. I'm simply going to give my in-depth opinion about the franchise as a person who's been seeing the show for the first time, and as a person that really is into both anime or manga shows, and I'll be mainly going through the original anime, the End of Evangelion movie, and the rebuild films. Not Evangelion Death because that's a recap movie, nor the manga because... okay, I just didn't want to read it. But I slowly realized that in the end, the Evangelion franchise isn't just a normal anime. It manages to become a deconstruction of anime and storytelling itself. It's like no other show I've ever seen before. One that I can confidently say that I could call one of a kind. But to truly understand what makes Evangelion so special, first we need to talk about its creator, Hideaki Anno. Anno is a Japanese artist, animator, and filmmaker, originally starting his career as an animator in 1982. However, it wasn't until 1984 where he started to gain recognition after working on the animated film Nausea and the Valley of the Wind, where he would later afterward become one of the co-founders of Gainax and become an animator director for the animated movies such as Royal Space Force and Nadia and The Secret of the Blue Water. Following the production of Nadia, Anno fell into a 4-year depressed state which followed him when making Neon Genesis Evangelion. In 1995, Anno began production of the original anime of Evangelion, and at the time, Anno became disenchanted with how anime was like, and that's why Anno made Evangelion the way he did. He wanted to be unlike any anime that was made back at the time, something mature, psychological, and exposed the realities of life, which led to the show getting darker as it went along. The show did not garner high ratings in the initial time slot, which didn't help by the fact that the show's budget wasn't really that good to begin with, but being moved to a later noon pretty much gained considerable popularity. As time went on, it literally just gained a significant impact not only in TV show and anime, but media itself. Animes, cartoons, music, and even stories made by others got inspired by Evangelion, and critics to this day still think that Evangelion is one of the best animes to ever exist. However, back then, unless you lived in Japan, bought the DVDs, or, became a very, very, very legal, not illegal pirate, there really wasn't a way to watch Evangelion. That was till 2018. November 26, 2018, the streaming company Netflix announced that they acquired the worldwide streaming rights to the original Evangelion, Evangelion Death, and the End of Evangelion, even though they couldn't get the rights to Fly Me to the Moon, which, yes, I am very pissed off about, thanks for asking, and it was released on March 22, 2019, which is how I watched the series in the first place. And before you ask, I watched both subbed and dubbed, and I like them both, okay? Shut up. Even though the original English dub was fucking garbage.
I'm sorry. I'm really in a hurry, kid.
But with the history out of the way, I think we need to stop wasting time and talk about why I think Neon Genesis Evangelion, the End of Evangelion, and the rebuilds are just really, really good. So without further ado, let's begin where it all started, with the original anime.
自分が作ったアニメは好きですか？
まあ好きといえば好きですけど、結構嫌いなところもあります。
嫌いなところはどんなところですか？
自分が出てるところ。
Okay, so I thought about how exactly I was going to structure this video, and after having a long discussion with myself that don't question it, I finally decided to do something bold. I figured out that doing a small analysis of the show itself isn't going to really do enough. So, I'm gonna do what I do best and review every episode of this show. Yup, all 26 episodes. Every single one. This is surely going to be fun to edit, right? Okay, let me set the stage real quick. The year is 2015, not like the actual 2015, but like 2015 in the show. And we get to see the setting of where the show will be mainly taking place. That being the futuristic yet destroyed looking city of Tokyo 3. Also, I don't know, but it's just kind of funny seeing how people thought the 2000s weren't going to be like, motherfuckers really thought we're going to be smart enough to invent a flying car. Now, the only thing flying are lawsuits from Disney, but that's a story for another day. You see the area being empty, only being covered with tanks and other military weaponry defending the city from being called an angel. While this is happening, we get introduced to our main protagonist, 14-year-old Shinji Ikari, who's trying to get in contact with a very attractive woman. Pretend like you didn't hear that, until suddenly we see a blue-haired girl in the middle of the road, but after looking briefly, she disappears. Then BAM! A fucking angel destroys a fucking aircraft and a major-ass explosion shows up, and something blocks Shinji from getting hit by the explosion, and that was the car driven by the woman Shinji was looking for, named Misato Katsuragi, and guys, I'm not a simp. However, let's play a game. Let's say I was. And here's what I would thought if I, for some reason, felt attracted to her. Yeah. Guys, I swear I'm not a simp. So after getting away from the angel, Misato takes Shinji to Nerf headquarters, also known as the headquarters of the military people from earlier, where we find out why Shinji came to Tokyo 3 in the first place, that being because his father wanted him for a reason I'll explain in a bit. We also get a hint of Misato's past with her mentioning her complicated relationship with her father. After Misato gets lost, her work partner Ritsuko finds her and... God damn! Soon, all three enter a room where both Shinji and the audience encounters the Evangelion for the first time, more specifically Eva Unit 1. This is also where Shinji encounters his father after so long. Gendo, who's Shinji's dad, brought him because he needed someone to pilot the Eva, but Shinji refuses, which leads to Gendo asking them to bring the other Eva pilot, that being the young girl we saw earlier in the episode. We also find out that her name is Rei Ayanami. However, this time she seems more injured and really isn't in the best state to pilot something like that. So Shinji reluctantly agrees to, get on the Eva and pilot it. The episode ends with Shinji heading into the Eva to stop the angel. And cliffhanger. Overall, this is a great first episode. It gives you a small look at the main cast, and it leads you to wonder what will happen and where the story will go from there. So overall, really good first episode. Episode 2 begins where episode 1 ended, with Shinji about to fight the first angel. Well, not the first angel in, like, the show. Apparently, like, this is the third one, but, like, I'm not really counting. He doesn't know how to pilot the Eva, and is worried that he'll make a mistake, which leads to him lowering his defenses, which leads to the angel heavily injuring the Eva. Then this thing just cuts to Shinji being in a hospital, leading to the audience to wonder what happens, and if the angel was actually defeated. But don't worry, we actually find out a lot later in the episode. We also get to see Genda talking to some old men group, apparently, about something called the Human Instrumentality Project, which will be important later down, but just keep that in mind. Anyway, Misato comes to pick up Shinji from the hospital, and we find out that Shinji will be living alone, but Misato doesn't really like that, so she suggests that Shinji lives with her.
And don't worry, I'm not gonna be making any passes at him.
And they were really leading this up earlier than I thought. Shit, so the rest of the episode, we see a more lighthearted tone, seeing Shinji adjusting to his new home. Actually, something about that, what I find interesting is how Shinji feels rather reluctant when he says, as he really isn't sure if he considers this to be his new home yet.
I'm home.
Welcome home.
Around 6 minutes before the episode ends, we see the aftermath of the fight earlier, where the Eva doesn't really die or gets really that injured, but instead it quote-unquote goes berserk, where it literally starts beating the ever-loving shit out of the angel until it explodes to a cross. And guys, don't expect me to go over-analyze the Christian symbolism in here, because there really isn't much to say. Anno himself literally said that he added the cross explosions and other Christian symbolisms because it, quote-unquote, looks cool. And I mean, he kind of has a point because it does. The episode ends with Misato reassuring that Shinji did a good job and that others will appreciate him. This episode was really nice. I like the more light tone of this episode to the contrast of the most tense stuff from the last episode. It has a nice balance between lighthearted moments with the exciting moments, which I can also appreciate. Also, Pen Pen gets introduced in this episode. Let's fucking go! Episode 3 begins 3 weeks after the event of episode 1 and 2, with Shinji doing his Eva simulation training in a pretty exhausting way. The next morning, after trying to wake Misato up, Shinji goes to his new school, where we meet 3 minor characters, those being Toji, Ida, and the class rep. That's not her actual name, but I don't know what her actual name is, so class rep it is. Noritsuko also informs Misato after transferring to his new school, Shinji has yet to make a friend. This is also where she brings up the quote-unquote hedgehog's dilemma, a metaphor about intimacy with others.
Do you know the fable, The Hedgehog's Dilemma?
Hedgehog? You mean those animals with the spiny hair?
Even though a hedgehog may want to become close with another hedgehog, the closer they get, the more they injure each other with their spines. It's the same with some humans. The reason he seems so withdrawn is because he's afraid of being hurt.
Oh yeah, and Rei is also in the school too. She still looks fucked up though. Back to the main topic, Toji mentions that he hasn't been in school in a while since the Eva fight, since his little sister was injured because of the fight. They later find out that Shinji was the Eva pilot, and after class, Toji punches him in the face since he blames him for his sister getting injured. Shinji reassures that it's not his fault for piloting the Eva, which makes Toji angrier, but he decides to let him go. Rei later arrives to tell Shinji about the next angel appearing. It's like a giant fish-looking thing. So after the city gets evacuated, Shinji fights the angel. However, Toji and Ida go to see the fight outside, and they almost get killed after Unit 1 almost crushed them. Then Toji and Ida go inside the Eva with Shinji, who's at this close to almost going through a mental breakdown, but in the end, Shinji kills the angel while also being in tears as Ida and Toji look at him. Days later after the fight, Shinji doesn't appear at school, so Ida gives Toji Shinji's phone number so he can apologize. The episode ends with Toji calling Shinji, but hanging up the phone in the last minute. This episode is overall pretty good. I like the way they introduce both Toji and Ida to the series, 2 minor characters that are pretty important since they are Shinji's first true friends. It also helps by the fact that Toji and Ida are just really good characters and I really like them. But I think what's important about this episode is how it focuses on showing Shinji's new life, a life that he really isn't happy with, mostly because he's literally, having the fate of the world in his hands, and that's what people expect him to do. It's a nice episode with an interesting concept of how Shinji feels in the start of piloting an Eva, and this idea gets expanded even more and even done better in the next episode, episode 4. 4 is, like I mentioned before, an interesting look at how Shinji feels about his new life. After having enough stress from fighting Angel, Shinji decides to run away from his home, and for most of the episode we see Shinji listening to his cassette player while going to other places, from a train to a movie theater. Something interesting to notice about the movie theater scene is how Shinji looks at a couple, and when they get intimate, Shinji's eyes glow as if he's interested and fascinated about the closure of others, and from the look of his face, he's not happy or sad or anything, as he's just neutral about it. And this says a lot about his character that I'll go into later on in the video. While leaving the theater, he goes out to the woods where he comes across Ida, who's pretending to be a survivalist. Later that day, Ida told Shinji that Toji was sorry and that his sister scolded him for punching Shinji, where he would later bring up his envy of Shinji being under Misato's care and piloting an Eva. But after Shinji responds, Ida says something rather interesting.
Really shouldn't, you know. Your mother would probably be worried.
Huh? Oh, don't worry about my mother. I don't have one of those.
Oh.
I'm no different from you.
What's fascinating about this scene is this is the first verbal reference we get to hear about Shinji's mother. It may not be a seemingly important topic now, but her appearance will definitely be important later on. The next day, Nerf agents manage to track down Shinji and take him back to headquarters. When Ida goes back to school and tells Toji everything, Toji is understandably angry, but Ida's in the right. What exactly was he supposed to do? He's just a kid against a bunch of armed and trained military men. So we go back to Shinji, who's back in Nerf headquarters, where Misato shows up and asks him if he wants to pilot the Eva again. When Shinji gives her an answer, Misato, who's been the only sympathetic adult in the show towards Shinji as of this, well, series so far, she responds in a way that I didn't expect her to respond to.
But you don't want to do it.
Of course not. It's not something that comes to me naturally. But Ayanami and you and Miss
Stow that line of crap! This has nothing to do with any of us. If you don't like it, get out of here. Just forget all about Ava and us and go back where you came from. We don't need someone with that attitude piloting.
What makes the scene so fascinating is that this entire scene we never get to see Misato's face, just her silhouette, meaning that Shinji was never truly paying attention enough to even look at her. So after Shinji gets the option to leave or stay, Shinji does what we all expect him to do at this point, and that is stay. That is a joke, of course he fucking leaves. Ritsuko informs Gendo about this, and of course Gendo is heartbroken. That is also a joke, of course he doesn't fucking care. Before Shinji leaves Tokyo 3, Toji and Ida meet up with him at the train station, where they basically have a little heart-to-heart, and Toji tells Shinji to punch him, and Shinji does, reluctant of course, but now they've set their piece and Shinji leaves. He tries to go back as the Nerf agents stop him, screaming and crying about he's just a coward, showing that even though he wanted to leave at the start, he realizes now that he just feels conflicted about leaving. It seems that Shinji's about to leave. Misato shows up in the last minute and tries to stop him from leaving, but the train leaves. But the last second we see that Shinji never left, which leads to the infamous quote-unquote Evangelion staying doing nothing scenes. The first of its kind, and it only lasts a couple of seconds, but I think it's a nice moment since both Shinji and Misato are lost of words of what happened. But the episode ends with Shinji saying that he's home, with Misato welcoming him back, as a parallel to episode 2 with those same lines, except Shinji says it with a bit more confidence. Overall, this episode is great, a good start to Shinji's character development in the show, and just an interesting character study all around. What makes this even more interesting is that this is the only episode in the anime that Hideaki Anno didn't help write or even co-write. But overall, this is still one of my top 5 favorite episodes. Definitely no debate. Episode 5 is interesting, to say the least. It begins with a flashback of Hooray piloting her Eva until it suddenly malfunctions, to the point of it shutting down. This worries Gendo to the point where he had to go through the N3 plug, and he saves Ray. It's interesting to see how Gendo actually care about someone, but it's so weird for him to care for, out of anyone, Ray. He doesn't show his son this much remorse, so it leads to the audience to wonder why he would care so much about her. Now to the present, we go back to Shinji in his school, looking at Ray, and contrary to what others think, him looking at her isn't because he likes her, but because he's more curious of her more than anything, and I can definitely see why. I mean, if I was piloting a murdering monster machine and barely know anything about the other person who I'm working with, who also so happens to pilot a murdering monster machine, well, of course I'm going to raise an eyebrow. So yeah, back in Misato's place, Ritsuko drops by and has dinner with Shinji and Misato, where we also find out that Misato's not really the best at cooking. Don't really know why I wrote that in the script. I don't know, I just don't fucking know. So anyway, Ritsuko gives Shinji Ray's new ID, which she says she forgot to give Ray, and she asks Shinji so he can deliver her ID, and he does him the next day, where he enters her house without her permission, and then he looks at her stuff. Okay, this is kind of fucking creepy, what the fuck? And then he finds his dad's glasses there, which apparently are broken, and I guess this were back when he saved her, and then she kept them as a token of thing. I'm not really sure. Rei shows up in a tower to taking a bath, and she seems more annoyed about Shinji having the glasses instead of, you know, him breaking into her house, but that doesn't fucking matter, bro. Then before she can grab the glasses, Shinji trips, and they fall in a heap with him landing on top of her. After a pause of several seconds, she asks him to move, only for him to notice that he has her hand in her breast. Now, this would be the part where in a normal anime, Rei would be mad and she would slap Shinji, but this is where that deconstruction of anime aspect of Evangelion comes to play. Instead of being played as a joke, instead it's being played as more awkward interaction, because that's how it would most likely be played in real life. And what sells this scene even more is Rei's pale, new reaction to the entire situation. Not even being bothered, she just asks Shinji to move out of the way, and she dresses as if nothing happened, unlike Shinji, who's just embarrassed from the entire situation from the start. They both go to the Nerve headquarters. Shinji finally gives Rei her new ID, and as they ride an escalator, Shinji asks her if she's afraid to ride her Eva again, to where Rei replies asking Shinji if he believes in his father's work, and of course Shinji replies with no, and tells her that Gendo is a terrible father, to where we get this iconic scene.
Again. What's wrong?
The episode ends with the introduction of the next angel. A fucking shape. So here I dub it as the Shape Angel. Overall, this episode is pretty good. It was interesting to get some content to introduce Rei more and develop her more as a character, as well as the introductions to Shinji's interest to try, and I say try with very big quotation marks, to interact with somebody. But it's an overall very solid episode. I'll keep it honest, episode 6 is pretty rad. It continues after the events of episode 5 with Rei and Shinji about to fight the Shape Angel. Yes, I'm actually going to be calling it that. And before they can truly fight it, Shape Angel just shoots Unit 1, with Shinji getting out of commission and getting hospitalized, with Unit 1 being out of commission as well for a good chunk of the episode. Hooray! While that's happening, Masato comes up with a plan to stop the angel. And what's that plan? Simple, to destroy the angel using a proton beam rifle and fire it from outside of its attack zone. Or in simple terms, grab a fucking rifle and take the Alex out of Tokyo 3 and shoot that motherfucker up. That sounds really cool. Shinji's going to be responsible for shooting Shape Angel, and Rei's responsible for shelling Shinji. And although Ritsuko is somewhat worried that the plan won't work, Gendo's pretty much desperate at this point and says fuck it, so she approves of Masato's plan. Back to Shinji, who at this point has regained his consciousness back. Rei informs him of the plan, but Shinji just doesn't want to pilot the Eva, so Rei offers that she will pilot both Unit 1 and 0 against the Shape Angel. Shinji's like, nah, never mind. So before the fight at midnight, Shinji and Rei talk to each other about why exactly they're pilots. Rei's response is rather interesting. Not only does it say about the character she currently is, but gives the audience a very subtle hint about who or what she actually is.
Ayanami, just why do you pilot this thing?
Because I'm bonded to it.
You're bonded?
Yes, it's a bond.
You mean to my father?
To all people.
You're very strong, Rei.
I have nothing else.
Then comes midnight. Lights of Tokyo 3 are gone, and the Evas are ready to beat that bitch-ass motherfucker Shape Angel. Shinji shoots this shot, and then, Shape Angel brings some sort of fucking quadratic formula shit and shoots back at Shinji, leading to the shots reflecting each other. So while Shinji's about to charge the shot and shoot him again, Shape Angel comes back and shoots him, but Rei says like, nah, and then fucking protects Shinji. Then Unit 1 gets injured in the process, but Shinji manages to shoot Shape Angel, and Shape Angel dies. After the battle's over, Shinji rushes to see if Rei's okay, and she is, kind of paralleling what his dad did in the start of episode 5, and then leading to Shinji falling over in tears. Rei is confused and apologizes about worrying Shinji and asks him if she can do anything, to where Shinji responds with this. Overall, this episode is awesome. I love the small heart-to-heart moments with Shinji and Rei. That battle with Shape Angel was pretty fun and exciting, and seeing Masato is always a delight. So an overall great episode. Man, I've been getting these great episodes. Hopefully nothing ruins the streak of good episodes. Okay, so I think I need to explain myself with this one. I don't particularly hate this episode. In fact, I actually don't hate any of Eva's episodes. I just think that every time I watch the episode, I just feel nothing, and I think to myself, man, can I just, like, skip this episode, because watching it again, it just feels really boring. However, I do actually want to talk about some positives I do have with this episode. First of all, I think that the lighthearted tone of this episode was definitely a good decision on the writer's part. The last 4 episodes have been filled with action, and having an episode somewhat be calm is good. Seeing Shinji's perspective about Masato was also fascinating. Masato was fun to see on screen as well, with her interaction with Ritsuko, and the talk with Toji, Ida, and Shinji at the end of the episode was actually quite beautiful, as Shinji comes to learn that Masato, being her usual sloppy self, is her opening herself to Shinji, seeing her more as family. Shit, if that's the case, she's probably from Alabama, putting money ahead of myself. But that's all the things I kind of like about this episode. The American Robot wasn't interesting, the quote-unquote fight wasn't really nothing to write home about, and yeah, like I said, not a bad episode by any means, but if you want to skip an episode of the show, I recommend this one. Later episodes handle Shinji's perspective on Masato a whole lot better than this. Oh boy, time to talk about a fan favorite episode. Episode 8 is widely considered to be the best episode of the original series. And man, I truly wonder why. Anyway, the episode begins with Masato bringing Shinji, Toji, and Ida to an aircraft carrier from another Nerf mission. Not sure why they brought Ida and Toji, but I'm not complaining. Anyway, these carriers are carrying Ava Unit 2, which also means we get introduced to what the fandom considers to be the quote-unquote best girl of the show, being none other than the one and only Asuka Langley. And if I'm being completely honest, I really find her to be a really overrated character. And with those simple words, I've managed to piss off a bunch of weebs. Like, okay, she is a good character, like a really good character, don't get me wrong, but as an introduction and my first impressions of her, I just thought that she was annoying as fuck. Anyway, move on to see Masato talking to the captain of the ship, and suddenly we get introduced to yet another major character introduced into this episode and into the series, that being none other than Ryoji Kaji. I won't go full in depth in my thoughts on the guy, but I like him. He's a nice breath of fresh air to the show with his chill energy, while also having a sense of mystery to him, whether it's with his past with Masato or his plan with Nerf. Or against Nerf? It'll make more sense in the future when I talk about it, trust me. Well, while that's happening, an angel appeared, yay! And it looks like an eel being combined with a shark, so I'm going to be calling it the Eel Shark Angel. Now, I know that a lot of people are definitely going to be angry that I won't be calling these angels like by their canon name, and to that I have to say, cry about it. Now Asuka finds it to be a perfect time to show off her Ava piloting skill and impress the others, while also taking Shinji with her. So they both ride Unit 2 and fight the Eel Shark Angel, but unfortunately they can only fight it underwater. So Masato gets an idea from something that I just said before about fishing, and that is to have Unit 2 open Eel Shark's mouth and shoot it with a fucking ship gun. And people say that animation isn't creative. Yes, expect that the plan works and the fucking angel dies, and the rest of the gang escapes safely, unlike Kaji, who left long after the battle began. So Kaji goes back to Nerf HQ and gives Gendo a box where a fetus thing is inside, and Gendo says that this is Adam, aka the first angel. See, I know I got that right. And it is the key of the Human Instrumentality Project. Now you might be wondering, what is that thing? And I'll make sure to talk about that later. That doesn't matter right now. Overall, the episode ends with Asuka introducing herself as a new student to Shinji's high school. Overall, this episode was really fun. I wouldn't say it's the best episode of the show. Hell, I wouldn't even consider it top 10 material in my opinion, but I had a lot of fun with it. As an introduction episode to both Asuka and Kaji, I think it's really good, and it leaves the audience to wonder what their role is going to be heading into this show. But overall, I think that this episode is very, very good. Episode 9 is also yet another fan favorite episode, and I definitely do agree with this one because episode 9 is a really good episode. It focuses on Asuka moving in with Masato and Shinji, and they both need to work together in harmony to stop the next angel. I think I'll call this angel, I don't fucking know, Double Dash Angel, I don't know. The only problem is that Shinji and Asuka don't really work that well together, so they basically spend the rest of the episode trying to work together as well as a training montage. And I definitely do have to say that seeing Shinji and Asuka kind of bond and work together while also struggling with that is actually really fun. It gives me a sort of brother and sister attitude or best friend kind of vibe. It's really nice. And you'd think that the episode will go as normal, where after they do the montage they would fight Double Dash Angel and then the episode would end and yada yada yada. It actually doesn't do that. It takes an interesting turn with Masato having to work late, leaving Shinji and Asuka alone. When it's nighttime, something interesting happens. While Shinji was listening to his always iconic tape player and going to sleep, as he closes his eyes, he feels something, and when he opens his eyes, he sees Asuka, who I just kind of presumed that she slept, walked over to his futon, and just kind of stayed there, and Shinji attempts to kiss her, which is interesting since this is the first time we actually see Shinji reaching out to some sort of intimacy with another person. But then he stops himself when this happens. That right there, ladies and gentlemen, and non-binary people, is what I like to call a fucking foreshadowing. This is the first time we ever see Asuka's insecurities, and it really makes you question if her carefree yet stubborn attitude is nothing more than a facade. But for someone like Shinji, who's literally being bullied and harassed by her ever since the last episode, those words made up his mind that at the end of the day, she's just a fragile and childish girl, not different to whatever he is. Anyway, the next day happens, and they pretty much kick Double Dash Angel's ass with a really amazing and incredible animated fight scene. Anyway, this is an overall pretty good feel-good episode. However, this is an episode where I kind of have the same feelings towards episode 7. Not that I think that it's a mid-episode, I think this episode's very much better than episode 7, just that I think that the main point of discussion is the final 10 minutes. But overall, I think that this is a really good episode that really foreshadows what's going to happen to Asuka's character development. Alright, so episode 10 has easily been considered by the community to be the worst episode of the show, and to be honest, while I can definitely see where they're coming from, nope, cannot come up with an excuse. Okay, so you remember when I said that I only didn't like episode 7? Yeah, so I kind of lied about that. Episode 10 isn't really that good of an episode either. I'm not really going to go on a tangent about this episode either, considering that the fact that there's a lot of people that have expressed their disliking towards this episode, and in a better way, so I better just save my breath and just avoid this episode. I guess my biggest problem with it is just really boring. Also, there's like a really bad boner joke at the end.
What?
I guess it was kind of cool seeing how an angel goes through their life cycle, but like, that's about it. Yeah, that's really all I gotta say. Like I said, it's just a really mediocre episode. Actually, wait a second, wait. This episode did actually introduce something very important.
See who that is? Huh? It's your mom!
If I'm being completely honest, I forgot about the plot of this episode before rewatching the series for this video, and I thought to myself, man, is this going to be another episode 7 and 10 situation? But no, this episode is actually really good. This begins with Ritsuko and 2 other Nerve agents meeting up with Commander Fuyutsuki. I haven't mentioned him yet in this video because he hasn't really done anything since he's just Gendo's right-handed man, but I'll go more into detail about him soon. He also mentioned something called the Magi, which is a supercomputer that does all the work for the city council. Although we will see more of this later in the series, it's really interesting seeing a perspective of someone that is upper class at Nerf giving their 2 cents on their workplace. In the meanwhile, we see Shinji talking to his dad because he needs him to show up for a career discussion interview, and Gendo just says that's job is for Misato, and to not call him for anything stupid like that ever again.
Is it? Hurry up.
I'm supposed to tell my parent that an interview for advanced vocational education is going to be held at school.
I've delegated all of that to Katsuragi. Don't bother me with such nonsense anymore.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Father of the Year. Let's give him a round of applause. At the same time, Misato and Kaji are in an elevator until it suddenly stops working, where we find out that the power in the entirety of Tokyo 3 is gone, where we also find out that an angel is attacking. Great timing. Now, okay, what do I name this fucking angel? You know what? It looks like a spider. It's big. Fuck, I got it. Giant enemy spider. In the meanwhile, we see Shinji, Asuka, and Rei going to headquarters, but since the power is gone, they need to find a way inside. And this is the first episode we get to see the 3 main pilots working together outside their Avas, and their dynamic is legit great. Asuka's the leader, Shinji is the brawn, somewhat, and Rei's the straight man, or woman in this case, of the group. Not only that, but we also see their perspective as pilots, with Shinji finally popping the question of what exactly are angels, and Asuka doesn't really care and sees them as a threat that they need to be defeated. Anyway, more shenanigans happen and they find the Avas ready to be launched, so they pilot the Ava, fight and kill the enemy spider angel, and then the power comes back, because of course. Oh yeah, right, this is also the moment where I remember that Misato was in this episode, and I kind of don't get why, because there were mini segments showing how Hoshino and Kaji were doing, which I guess were sort of made for comedic relief, but then again, Shinji, Asuka, and Rei's dynamic throughout the entirety of the episode were sort of comedic, but that's besides the point. The episode ending with the three pilots being on top of a hill pondering about the night sky, with Rei saying something psychological and Asuka just kind of brushing it off. Overall, this episode was really fun. I like how it displays each of the pilots' personality and quirks, also starting to unravel the mysteries regarding Nerf and what exactly angels are. It might seem like a bit of a filler episode, and let's face it, it is one, but it's a really good episode nonetheless. The start of episode 12 is my personal favorite introduction to any Evangelion episode. It begins with a flashback of the year 2000 with the second impact happening, where we see Misato's father saving her before he died, seeing what exactly happened during the second impact and how exactly it affected both the world and the people in it. It was fascinating to see. Now back in the present, Shinji's sync rate is rapidly rising. Try saying that 3 times fast. Shinji's sync rate is rapidly rising. Actually, it's not that hard to say, but whatever. And he will soon catch up to Asuka over time, which seems like it's actually kind of irritating towards the latter. Anyway, they go back home, they celebrate Masato's promotion, and we get to see that Gendo and Commander Fuyutsuki are in an air carrier in the Red Sea of Antarctica, and it makes complete sense to why it looks like this. In the flashback in the start of the episode, the biggest part that was impacted due to the second impact was Antarctica, so of course it wasn't going to completely recover from the attack like many other places. Also here, where we find out that the next angel arrives on Earth, aka a dark matter reject. Yay! So Masato comes up with one of her famous impossible sounding solutions to defeat the angel. What's interesting is that, unlike episode 6, almost everyone is doubtful about her plan, including Shinji and Asuka themselves. And how does Masato resolve the conflict? Well, it's actually quite an easy answer to you, viewer. She tells the pilots if they succeed, they eat a nice steak dinner. And let me tell you something, if there's something that helps someone get motivated, it's a nice steak dinner. Unless you're vegan, in which case, can't really help you there, pal, now, can I? Going to their Ava, Shinji asks Asuka the same question he asked Rei in episode 6. Why are you piloting Evangelion? And her answer is actually a good representation of Asuka's entire character and the arc she's going to overcome in the show. What makes this conversation even more interesting is that once Asuka asks him the same question back, he doesn't respond. This would later transition to a flashback of the conversation between Misato and Shinji, where Misato tells Shinji why she works for Nerf in the first place, and the reason is to avenge her father, though she gave a pretty harsh description of her father while talking to him. To put it simply, dear viewer, Misato's connection to her father is a complicated one. He was very neglectful towards her and her mother, barely making any time for her, and even with that, in his last moments of living, he sacrificed himself for his own daughter to grow up and live her life. This, of course, had a very big traumatic impact on her, not speaking for an entire year, and permanently changing the way she views her father and any other man she meets and has a relationship with. But, won't really be apparent in the series just yet. Anyway, this leads to a fancy angel battle. Asuka stabs the dark male reject angel in the eye, and it dies! Hooray! When everything is alright, Gendo calls and he does the impossible and actually congratulates Shinji? Who knew that with those simple words he would change how we would view Shinji in the future of the show? The episode kind of ends on a pretty positive note. It ends with Masato and the three pilots going to a ramen place and Shinji finally coming to terms to why exactly he's a pilot. In the start of the series, we know why he started piloting the Evangelion. That's because his dad told him to. But then he comes to terms that the reason why he keeps doing it is because he wants the approval of his father. Whether that's positive or toxic, I'll leave that to the interpretation of the viewer. Overall, I wasn't expecting much for this episode, especially with the fact that I didn't remember much of it, but I ended up loving it. Everything about this episode. Not one of my favorites, but it's definitely a great one. Episode 13 is an episode I've seen a lot of people shit talk about. In fact, I think I've seen more people criticize this episode more than episode 10 and 7 combined. And may I ask, why exactly? In fact, I actually really do like this episode. The main criticism I see torn around and thrown in this episode is that this episode doesn't focus on the pilots, but rather than the adults. And the main character in this episode was Ritsuko. I really don't mind being focused on the characters that aren't the pilot. In fact, I think it's actually pretty good since it expands the world of the show, and it gives a more in-depth look at some of the secondary characters. And as for being focused on Ritsuko, what's the problem with that exactly? The only guess I can get is that people don't like Ritsuko, but even with that, she is still an important character to the story. Well, you know the drill. The episode begins, the pilots are doing their synchronization test until suddenly an angel appears in Nerf headquarters. This is unlike any angel we have seen before in the show. This angel's more like a virus than a monster-like creature, but even with that, it actually manages to be the most threatening of the angels so far, since it almost comes close to winning. Yeah, that's the basic synopsis of the episode, since it mainly focuses on being a Ritsuko-centered episode, and focusing more on her background, mainly her mother and the connection to the Magi. Well, in this episode, I guess her mother's literal connection to the Magi. What I find interesting how her mother splits her personalities in the Magi with the three things she sees herself as. Her as a mother, her as a scientist, and her as a woman. Generally an interesting concept. Let's get a bit of insight into Masato's past with Ritsuko. It shows the audience that they clearly have a history away from work. But I think what's more interesting is the established relationship between Ritsuko and her mom, with Ritsuko hating aspects of her mom, but also respecting others, which leads to her understanding how to use the Magi to stop the angel in the end. But anyways, I guess you can guess what happens next. Ritsuko uses the Magi and destroys the angel. This is a hard episode to talk about since it's more of a character analysis of Ritsuko than anything, so I'm talking about it as such. But other than the character analysis stuff, which I think is great, I like the unique angel we get in this episode, plus the great writing to go along with it. So yeah, overall, a pretty good episode. Okay, so this one's a weird one because half of it is a recap episode and the rest is a mini adventure, so I'm gonna briefly talk about this episode. It's pretty decent. But what I do find interesting is how many interesting bits of lore we get in a fucking recap episode. Name drops like the Spear of Longinus, the name of the old man group from episode 2 is actually called Sele, and other stuff. Also, Ray's being psychological as fuck in this episode. That's kind of interesting, I guess.
Let me not mar that perfect dream by an oral stain, but so adjust my daily night that it may come again. Emily Dickinson wrote that. Who?
Anyway, not really much to say here. Decent episode, but hey, at least it gives us a hint of what's to come. Episode 15, at least to me, is where I think the show makes its biggest change. You may not see it at first, but I feel like this episode is a good representation of where Evangelion is going to go from here on out and what type of tone it's going to have. I also think that this is the last lighthearted episode we get to see of the show before everything goes to shit. And like most downfalls, it started off small, but it eventually gets worse from here. And I don't mean by worse as in the show dips in quality, I mean as in worse as in everyone's gonna, you know, fucking suffer, type of worse, if you get what I mean. I think the episode starting out with Kaji talking about infiltrating and working against Nerf is the perfect way to open the episode. Not only does it raise questions like, hey yo, who's Kaji working for? Or why is he working in Nerf in the first place? But it also tells the audience to not trust anyone. It cuts back to Shinji talking to Rei in an elevator, where Shinji compliments Rei, and Rei is actually flattered, which is one of those rare occasions where Rei shows some sort of emotion. Man, the way Shinji must have said it must be really smooth. Let's see what he has to say.
Hey, when we were cleaning, that cloth, the way you ringed it, it reminded me of a mother when you squeezed it.
A mother.
Yeah. It just reminded me of a mom. I bet you'll make a great mother, Ray.
Never mind. Later on, Shinji, Asuka, and Masato do their own thing. While we don't focus much on what Asuka or Masato are doing, but rather it focuses on Shinji going with his father to see his mother's grave. The writing in this just adds that level of realness. The scene itself feels uncomfortable because Shinji feels uncomfortable. Being with the father that abandoned him long ago is now looking to get his approval, visiting the mother he didn't even know much. Plus, it also made me question how exactly she died when I first watched it. And like, damn, something really bad must have happened if they couldn't even find the body or anything remaining of her. I also really like how once Gendo leaves, Shinji says that he enjoyed his time with him, and Gendo doesn't really give a fuck. It shows how much Shinji's really trying to reach out and connect with his father. Even though Gendo really never gave a shit, at least I can give Shinji props for trying. So Shinji goes back home and practices his cello, and surprisingly he's actually really good at it. And when Asuka returns home and listens to him play it, she asks why he never stopped playing it, and he replies that no one really told him about it and he just kept going. And this is probably the best quote of the show that represents Shinji's character as a whole. Anyway, going back to Masato, who went to a wedding with Ritsuko and Kaji, they're just kind of vibing, I guess. We got some character building for all three characters and how close they used to be back in their college days, which later leads to a very well-written scene with Masato and Kaji as Masato breaks down. This is the first time we actually get to see more of a more vulnerable state and side of Masato, and I think it's very interesting to see how she sees herself. Oh yeah, and Asuka and Shinji kiss because Asuka was bored. That's not even me exaggerating for her to get a reaction. That is literally her exact reasoning. Now, the end of this episode is fucking wild. It has a great representation of what I said in the start of the segment. First off, yeah, Rei has done some fuck shit. And second, Masato catches Kaji snooping around as usual. And then...
Commander and Ritsuko are hiding something from you too. And this is it!
Holy fuck! So yeah, that's definitely a way to end an episode. Yeah, this episode is great. What I really like about this episode, and I think it does excellently, is its character building and interaction. Each scene gives an insight on the characters, their past, and their struggle. A top tier episode, no doubt. Episode 16 goes hard as fuck. Okay, so like, this episode finally answers a huge question that I bet every single one of you watching this video is having. What if Shinji's ego took the best of him? Well, after getting complimented by Masato when doing really well in his training exercises, we get to find out. Pretty interesting to see how Shinji's ego is inflated after both her compliment and his father finally praising him in episode 12. Stuff like him taking action against this episode's angel, aka Zero from Kirby. It's all stuff like the scene where he's in a train and quietly admiring the praise he's been given. Anyway, like I mentioned before, the next day, Zero from Kirby appears, and Shinji wants to take the lead into this next operation to take him down. But unfortunately, Zero gets the best of him, and the angel sort of Ava, you know, won. For the next half of the episode, Masato tries to find a way to set him free. I really like how she's the most worried about him, and furthers my point of first seeing him as family. As for the other two pilots, Asuka spends the entire episode jealous of the fact that Shinji had better scores in their training exercises, but still does care in her Asuka type of way, as in pretending not to care. And as for Rei, while you may not see it at first, she is also worried about him, standing up to Asuka when she was joking about the situation, plus even waiting in the hospital when he came back. It's a nice parallel compared to episode 6, where in that episode she just showed up to tell him the mission to take down the angel. As for Shinji, he's stuck in some sort of parallel universe / inside the angel. It's hard to explain, but what's important here is what we mostly see from Shinji is an entire monologue between him and his inner consciousness, and at times we get to see them. It's really interesting as we get some bits and pieces of his struggles and the insecurities that we will explore later into the show, like him always running away from people or a certain situation to avoid getting hurt himself, coming to a realization of what type of person he wants to become. As he slowly dies, Shinji accepts his fate, but there's one sliver of hope that saves him, and that's none other than his spirit of his— wait, what the fuck, his mom? The spirit of— wait, what? So yeah, Shinji survives, and we get to see one of the rawest scenes of the show. I don't get it, but we'll see where it goes from here. So yeah, the episode ends, Shinji's okay, and Ritsuko tells Gendo that Masato's suspecting about the Evas. Really can't appreciate about this episode, it does a lot to explore more about the psychological character moments, whether that's with Shinji's internal monologue with himself, or how it presents the current relationship between him and the other characters. Plus, that final scene with, like, him ripping out of the angel is so fucking cool. Overall, just a really, really cool episode. Episode 17 is kind of like episode 5, as it's only the beginning of an even bigger build-up for the next episode. Now in this episode, we get told that there's gonna be a 4th Evangelion pilot, and geez, I wonder who it is. Fucking Toji, like, they made it really obvious who it is. Like, it's painfully obvious who it is. Like, especially with how frequently we showed him in this episode, But I think it's one of those situations where they intentionally showed us who the audience is, so over time, the twist becomes more clear to the characters. As an overall episode, it goes back to the status quo, with Shinji not being as cocky as the last episode made him out to be, but still having that remaining continuity with the last episode, beginning with Sally asking Misato about the angel from the last episode. Other than the build up to the next episode, the episode is mostly pretty chill, while only showing us some of the relationship of the characters and how much they've grown ever since the start of the series. A great example is when Toji is speaking to Shinji about how he saw him when they first met, seeing him as the type to not go out of his way and help others, but after becoming friends, he was proving wrong. We also get to see more of Rei's growth as she becomes closer with Shinji. Boy, I hope nothing goes wrong. And hey, remember the class rep I mentioned in episode 3, which I never brought up since? Well, she has a crush on Toji, and it's honestly pretty adorable. So yeah, not much to say regarding this episode, I just think it's good. Oh yeah, now we get to the good part. This episode is really damn cool, while also being really damn dark. It begins with Shinji asking Misato about Unit 4, and it turns out that it was delisted after a test. Gee, I wonder why! They didn't make it obvious enough that Toji isn't the 4th pilot.
Oh, I rather doubt it. This one wasn't very enthused about the prospect at all. He won't talk. He only accepted under the condition that his younger sister be transferred into our private hospital.
They aren't even acting subtle at all at this point. One thing I really love about this episode is this is the perfect example of visual storytelling within Evangelion. More specifically, how they portrayed Toji. Throughout this episode, we never really get a monologue of Toji talking about being the 4th pilot. But that's because there's no need to do that. The visuals themselves explain his views than any written dialogue would. They rather show, not tell, and it's done very well. Of course, there are scenes where Toji speaks to people, like the scene where Toji talks to Rei about Shinji still not knowing that he's the new pilot. But most of the scenes are portrayed within silence about him and pondering his thoughts. Another character that I didn't expect to see more character development from is from Kaji. His talk with Shinji about his dad and not truly knowing what someone's thinking is one of my favorite moments in the entire show. The atmosphere is great and is topped off very well with the incredible music in the background. I'll explain my thoughts about the music about the show later, but the music in this scene just elevates the scene from great to fantastic. Now we get introduced to Ava Unit 3, aka the one that Toji's piloting, and the test seems to be going well, and then it goes wrong. The reason? The Ava's a fucking angel! Oh, that was a twist I wasn't expecting. I thought it was going to be the same thing as episode 7, but this twist made things a whole lot more interesting. And after the title card of this episode, oh boy, you know shit's gonna get wild when one of the hardest looking shots of the show appears, and it takes down Unit 2 without any struggle. So once Rei tries to get the jump on Unit 3, it literally fucking backwards jump onto Unit 0, which leads to Gendo having Unit 0's arm being disconnected, which means that Rei gets hurt because her neural collections were disconnected from the Ava. I absolutely don't blame you if you didn't understand anything of what I just said. And as Unit 3 goes to kill and fight Unit 1, Shinji is hesitant about fighting it because he notices the entry plug and refuses to hurt a kid just like him, and is even willing to die than to murder the pilot, which leads to Gendo disconnecting Shinji and having something called the dumbing plug to replace him and destroy the angel. And destroys the angel it does, but not only strangling it to death, but also crushing its head and destroying its organs while having to hear Shinji begging Gendo to stop it. But it keeps getting worse and even more gory, which leads to Unit 1 destroying the entry plug. And knowing that Toji's there, I was definitely on the edge of my seat with this one. We could tell hurt Misato, who just woke up after the Unit 3 escape, and after Kaji told her that Unit 1 took care of everything, it probably must have felt awful for her not telling Shinji who the pilot was. And the episode ends with Shinji finding out himself.
The 4th child is... Shinji... Shinji! Shinji! Shinji!
Wow, this episode was fucking incredible. With the build-up of the last episode, it was so worth it seeing the payoff, and it made me anxious and excited to see what will happen next. After such a brutal episode, you might think that they'll maybe tone it down a bit for this. Man, what the fuck am I saying? This is Neon Genesis Evangelion. We are way past the point of being lighthearted. The episode starts in what might just be the angriest we've ever seen Shinji at this point of the show, to the point of threatening to destroy Nerf with the Eva. But of course, Gendo deals with it by raising the LCL pressure, which knocks Shinji unconscious. We cut to the hospital, we see him resting, and we see Toji, which leads to seeing him in the train that Shinji was in back in episode 16, where we see the spirit of Shinji speaking to the spirit of Rei. He's unable to hear them since they're in another train cart, but Rei asks Shinji why he did the things he did, and Shinji explains how Gendo betrayed him and decides that he will, once again, run away from his problems. To Toji, who regained his consciousness, what follows is a pretty cute scene between him and the class rep. This also matches the last time we see Toji having a major role in the show, and although this is a bittersweet conclusion to his arc, I also think it's a great way to end it too. Back to Shinji, who's being held captive, he tells his father that he's done piloting and he gets the next ticket to leave Tokyo 3. And once Shinji leaves, you will never guess what happened. Like, never ever. An angel appears. Yeah, that definitely was unexpected. Rief has been noticing this. The angels have become stronger than the last, and this one looks like a robot from Wally. Yeah, I'm still giving them pet names, shut the fuck up. And just like the last angel, it manages to defeat Rei and Asuka without any problems. Shinji meets up with Kaji, where he's doing some gardening in his watermelon farm, and they have another talk, and yet this is another amazing and iconic moment in the show. It has the right amount of exposition, action, and incredible use of visual storytelling, all culminating with the incredible themed use here. And to find out that if an angel so happens to fuse with Adam, it could very well mean the end of humanity, as the third impact would very well happen. And the only person to stop that and save humanity from destruction is Shinji Ikari. So he goes off to Nerf, and we get to see that scene that somewhat parallels how Shinji saw his dad for the first time in episode 1. But instead of being afraid, we see him being more heroic and willing to fight to save humanity. And what follows is an action-packed battle between the Wally Angel and Unit 1. As Shinji is about to throw the final blow, Unit 1's power runs out, which gives the Angel a perfect time to attack, which seems to be going bleak until Unit 1 goes berserk, baby. Now that was I was waiting. That's crazy. I just can't wait for another amazing fucking... Wait, what's Unit 1 doing? Why is it moving like an animal? Wait, is it? Oh god, it's eating the angel, and it's breaking its armor? Wait, and apparently it wasn't armor, it was restraints? What the fuck? Fucking hell, dude. Boy, we are 6 episodes away from ending the show, and let me just say this. These next 6 episodes are generally some incredible works of art within themselves, and episode 20 is a perfect example how to start things out. So after the whole debacle with the previous angels, things are starting out not the greatest. Both Unit 0 and Unit 2 are severely damaged. Celia isn't too happy about how Gendo handled the last angel attack. Nerf somehow restrained Unit 1 again, but Shinji's synchronization levels with the Eva made him stuck in some sort of limbo. As for the rest of the episode, we have this day structure. We see how Nerf tries to bring Shinji back in the span of 33 days. Masato's probably the most worried about him in this episode, to the point of slapping Ritsuko for not helping as much. But we do get a pretty big piece of information what Evangelions actually are. So apparently, there's something resembling a human, created by human beings, based on angels. Whatever the fuck that means. And as for the remainder of the episode, we get to see what I can best describe as a literal mental trip, as Shinji self-reflects on the peoples closest to him as well as his enemies. But not only does he see the angels being his enemies, but also his own father fan abandoning him, making him almost kill Toji, and even saying that he killed his mom, even though we kind of don't know that yet, so I guess that's him just kind of like speculating. I don't know. He also thinks that people only like him because he pilots the Eva, which is far from the truth. We also have this scene where Shinji imagines Masato, Asuka, and Rei, and they ask him if he wants to become one with them. And at first watching, I didn't really understand and thought they would be fan service, but I actually see it as a teasing assimilation with like human instrumentality project. I think, take that with a grain of salt because I'm still not sure. But at the end, he rejects it and he escapes the Eva. The episode ends with Masato and Kajin having, you know,
sex.
Kaji gives her information about what he has learned. Interesting way to cap off the episode, to say the least. I don't really have much to say about this one out of the other episodes, since this is kind of my least favorite. But still, that doesn't mean that I love it. I still think it's pretty good nonetheless. Episode 21 might just be one of my favorite episodes out of the entire show. And yeah, that's comparing it to episode 22, 23, and 24 of the show, which many people have considered to be the best episodes in anime history. And there's a reason why I love it so much where I have to put it in such high regards. And that's because of how much information we are given in this episode, as well how it's presented. The episode doesn't begin with the introduction of the show, but rather the incident that caused the second impact back in Antarctica back in the day, where it leads to the present where Kaji has one more job left to do. It cuts to Masato receiving the news that Commander Fuyutsuki has been abducted, and Kaji's the main suspect, so because she's really close to him, they were looking for her to see if she knows where he is. We shortly find out that it was actually Sele who kidnapped Fuyutsuki to ask him these questions, and suddenly, he hears a name that he hasn't heard in a long while. Professor Fuyutsuki. This leads us to a flashback to 1999, where he used to be a teacher back before Nerf existed. At a bar, an acquaintance of him mentions a student who made a very fascinating project, and this, my friends, is none other than Yui Ikari, Shinji's mother. This is her first interaction to her as a character, and honestly, she's pretty fascinating. Shortly after their interaction, we see the first interaction with Gendo and Fuyutsuki, and unlike the soulless cold man we see in the present, back then Gendo was nothing but trouble, and Fuyutsuki just didn't fuck with him at all, so it came to a surprise when he found out that Yui was dating him, even calling him a charmer once you get to know him better. Soon at the end of the 20th century and the world was struck with the second impact, we skipped to 2002, where Fuyutsuki's an unlicensed doctor, but suddenly we get called to an investigation about the second impact. This is where we meet up with Gendo again, who is now married with Yui and had a child. I think we know who that is. We later see a younger, traumatized Masato who hasn't spoken a word since the second impact, which is now classified as a meteor attack, but we all know that's a blatant cover-up, and Fuyutsuki suspects that Gendo knew all the time. Cut to 2003 where he confronts Gendo about this, and the amount of evidence he actually has against him is pretty damn impressive. But before he could leave, Gendo shows him something, and introduces him to the older looking facility that we are used to seeing in the present, to where we meet yet another new character. Naoko Akagi. Last name sounds familiar, huh? Wink wink, Ritsuko's mom. Wink wink, I probably said her name wrong, and if I didn't, and if I did, then the comment section's definitely gonna scold me again. You even get to see a prototype of Eva Unit 0 seemingly being worked on. Fuyutsuki's beyond shocked when Gendo asks him to work with them to build a new, better mankind. Cut to 2005 where we get a flashback narrated by Ritsuko how she and Masato met. Masato's back to being herself and pretty much crashing at Kaji's place for a week after they met, which is interesting being told in a forum of communication between Ritsuko and her mother through letters. Now we go back to 2004 where we get the first testing of an Eva unit and Yui's gonna be the test subject.
But Yui, this is your experiment today.
That's why I brought him. I want to show him how bright the future will be.
The next day the motherfucker was dead.
After that, the Ikari name was never the same. Shinji was traumatized and abandoned by his dad, and Gendo changed forever, and now wanted to go forward with one plan. The Human Instrumentality Project.
But Manuel, you never explained what the fuck the Human Instrumentality Project yet. Are you actually gonna do it, you dumb fucking cunt?
Listen, I did say that, and don't worry, I will talk about it. Just not now. Cut to 2010, and now Gendo's taking care of a younger Rei Ayanami. And Naoko just doesn't have a good feeling about her, especially with the fact that there's no information about her. But, man, she felt like she's gonna strangle her, right?
You little bitch!
Little buddy, how are you doing?
Oh my god!
Whoa, 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 whoa,
Oh my god.
whoa, whoa, whoa.
So yeah, a couple moments later, she commits suicide after what she's done, and then Nerf was created. Now back at the present, Kaji saves Fuyutsuki, which unfortunately leads to his death. And the episode ends with what just might be the best moment out of the entire show, culminating with one of the most heartbreaking lines in the show for me. My god, bruh. So yeah, I adore this episode, bruh. It is so good. But man, why did it have to end like that? Oh god.
Move ahead. If I can see you again, I will say the words that I could not say 8 years ago.
Episode 22 is... Episode 22, yeah, I can't even come up with like a clever joke for this one. Episode 22 is fucked up. Like, really fucked up. Just like episode 13 is more of a character analysis for Ritsuko, the same can be said but with this episode, but with Asuka. As stated before that, when I first started the series, I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of her. In fact, I found her to be more annoying than charming, but on my second viewing of the show, I grew to appreciate and ultimately like her character a bit more. And episode 22 was kind of a big factor towards why. Not only did it make me understand her actions in earlier episodes, which just adds a level of rewatchability to the show, but also made me empathetic towards her. In the start of the episode, we get a small look into her past and what's to come. Asuka's mother was yet another person who was part of the Eva experiment. Even though she didn't die like Yui, she remained alive, but seemingly lost her mind thinking had her daughter as a doll. It then helped that soon after, Asuka's father starting having an affair with the doctor of his wife and abandoning his daughter. Man, is every parent in this show like a dickhead or something? God damn. This begins Asuka's need for approval and validation. Back at the present, Asuka's sync rate is lower than ever, and now there's talks of making Eva units up until 13 due to how damaged units 0 and 2 are. Although, that definitely does seem kind of like an excuse. Back at Misato's home, something feels off. It's not as charming as cozy as it used to be. Now it's more awkward more than anything. Till suddenly, Asuka gets a call from her stepmother, aka the doctor I mentioned earlier. And after their talk, she actually opens up a bit about her family to Shinji, although that doesn't last long. The next day arrives, and her sync rates are even worse, and it's due to her pride shattering. Whether it's with her lack of motivation or losing to Shinji, this could mean trouble in the future. And next up, we reach yet another classic moment in Evangelion, that being the elevator scene between Asuka and Rei, a still image that lasts 53 seconds until any movement begins again. Truly an incredible combination between uncomfortable tension and budget saving. So now Unit 2 is fixed and perfectly timing because a new angel appears. And hey, I actually know the name of this one too! Yeah, I bet you didn't expect that one now, did you? Unlike any other angel that we've encountered in the show so far, Ariel, aka the Sonic-looking boss angel, has the power to penetrate through someone's mind, and that it does to Unit 2, attacking Asuka to the point of her mental circuits being torn to pieces. But even so, she doesn't want to fall back. This is where we come to learn more about her past and insecurities, and seeing Asuka's mother fall to the deep end to the point of begging her daughter to kill herself as she asks who she is, and Asuka saying that she'll do it for her approval, made me feel disgusted and somewhat uneasy. And seeing child Asuka seeing her mother's body after committing suicide was just the final nail in the coffin. And after witnessing that all again, Asuka feels defeated as she calls out for Kaji's help and her Eva powering down. At this point, there's nothing left to do, and Gendo has no other option and tells Rei to her chief to steer off Longinus. Hey, you remember that thing from episode 14? Yeah, well, now has a purpose to use it against the angel. And they managed to kill the angel, but unfortunately the spear is now lost in space. As the end of the episode, while a good overall ending for everyone, it's seemingly not a very happy one for Asuka, as she's still coping with everything that happened, and begging and screaming that she hates everyone around her. This episode was absolutely rough to see unfold, but god damn it, it was a very beautiful and genius fucking character analysis for Asuka, as it gave me a new understanding towards her as a character. God damn, episode 22 was definitely something, I'll tell you that much. So hopefully episode 23 will definitely bring things back to normal. Maybe it'll be a little bit lighthearted. Nah, bro, what the fuck? So yeah, episode 23 isn't as dark as episode 22, but holy shit, so much stuff happens in this episode. Oh man, why did this episode have to remind me of the saddest moment in the show, bro? Like, come on, I just got over it. But from the looks of things, Misato's still not over Kaji's death. Asuka's playing in the class rep's house video games all day, still dealing with the stuff that happened in the last episode, and Sally's pissed off at Gendo for using the Spear of Longinus against the angel. But that doesn't matter now, because we got the next angel to deal with, and boy, am I struggling to find a nickname for this one. Man, they're really hard. So they send Rei and Asuka to fight the angel. And for a simplistic looking angel, it's still a really tough one, with it breaking through Rei's AT field quickly and starting to infect her as they're trying to make first contact in their angel type of way, if you know what I mean. Might seem like the perfect time for Asuka to help, right? Well, her pride has pretty much hit such a low point that she can't even move Unit 2 anymore, no matter how hard she tries it, and eventually she gets removed and moves back to headquarters, and they proceed to send Shinji to help Rei. But at that point, it's too Rei. Rei realizes that the only way that they could destroy the angel and keep Shinji safe is by fusing with the angel and self-destructing Unit 0, and such leads to her death. I was sort of expecting Rei to die in the show at some point, but damn, that's definitely a way to go out. So yeah, now that the Rain Angel is gone, we have none but one more angel to defeat. And what could it be exactly? Well, that doesn't matter right now, because just like with the spear, Seele is fuming that Unit 0 is now gone, and they decide to sneak some plans to kick Gendo out. Back at home, Shinji's pretty sad about this whole thing, and whoa, hey, Misato, what the fuck? Anyway, the next day arrives, and Misato gets a call from the hospital, and they go there to find out that Rei is completely fine. You know, something isn't right here. Oh yeah, and Seele captures Ritsuko to talk about Gendo, and it's revealed that she's Rei's replacement. Don't really know why she's naked, but okay. And out of anger, she calls Shinji and tells her to meet her as she wants to show him something. And Misato follows along as she receives a small message from Kaji telling her all the information that he knows. Ritsuko first shows them the room Rei was born in, as well as a graveyard filled with every failed attempt to make an Evangelion, which just so happens to be the place where Yui disappeared. And finally, they show them the truth of the dummy plug is that the core is filled with empty, soulless clones of Rei, and weirdly enough, she has the only vessel who was born with a soul, unlike the Evas, which souls had to be transferred to them. You know, there are way more things I was expecting to see in this series, but Rei being a clone of Shinji's mom was definitely not one of those things, and watching the series again and again, bits and pieces were actually making sense. And the ability to watch the series again and again and finding new stuff is truly incredible. And out of pure hatred, she destroys all the rest of the vessels. And this entire sequence is terrifying. The mix of tense music, the disembodied laughter of the clones, the dark atmosphere, and the cry of hopelessness from Ritsuko was genuinely scary. And at this point in the show, I didn't know exactly what to expect from it. Episode 24 starts with Asuka trying to kill herself. You know, I was sort of expecting shit to go dark heading into the series, but my god, I didn't think we would reach this level. At this point in the series, Asuka has literally hit the lowest point in her life. She's lamenting that life isn't worth living anymore because she can't pilot the Evangelion, and as such, she sees herself as useless. And she would have died if it wasn't for some nerve agents who came to find her. We cut to Shinji, who's sitting in a beach shore by himself, and that's really the only place he could go. He can't go back to Misato's place because what she tried to do to him last episode. Asuka is kind of in a comatose state. Toji and Ida both moved out of Tokyo 3 long ago, and he's too scared to face Rei after what he learned about her. If you think that things can't get any worse, we hear someone hum the song Ode to Joy, and this is where we get introduced to Kaoru Nagisa, aka the 5th pilot and Asuka's replacement. And for his first introduction, I can definitely see why he's a fan favorite. He absolutely steals the show with his wit, but also having a sense of mystery to him. He has little to none background information, with it being deleted. He's sent by Seele, his sync rates with Unit 2 are almost excellent, and even more worrisome is his first interaction with Rei, as he explains that they're both similar. Of course, I can't mention Kaoru without mentioning his growing, definitely not straight relationship with Shinji. Shinji opens up to him about his old life before he became a pilot, and the hatred to his father, and Kaoru states that he's worthy of his grace. Meanwhile, Misato's pretty suspicious about Kaoru, and thanks to an employee on Nerve, Ritsuko, and doing her own investigation, we find out that the dude is actually the final angel who is able to control Unit 2 without even being inside of it. They send Unit 1 to deal with it, and at first Shinji is, of course, pretty pissed off and feeling betrayed. Hell, he goes as far to compare Kaoru's betrayal that to his father's betrayal. Things are getting so desperate that he even have plans to self-destruct the Eva just to avoid the third impact from happening. But it's too late, and Kaoru has reached its final goal. Or so it seems. See, my dear viewer, you know that being that's been locked down below Nerf? You know that thing that a lot of people have been calling Adam? You know, it isn't actually Adam, but rather a being called Lilith. Unit 1 quickly catches Kaoru, and he explains that after spending time with Shinji, he decides that maybe humanity does deserve a second chance, and tells Shinji that he has no other option but to kill him. And after yet another still shot, this time even lasting longer than the elevator scene, Kaoru suffers the same fate as the other angels, and dies. And with that, every angel is now defeated, and the episode ends with Misato trying her best to comfort Shinji, as this is the beginning of his lowest point yet. Alright, so I decided to put these two episodes together because I genuinely do not know how to exactly discuss both of these episodes. It's like so weird to discuss these two episodes because of how vastly different they are compared to the other episodes in the show, but I'll try my best. First and foremost, let me get this out of the way. The human instrumentality has begun, which means I finally get to explain what it is. So basically, the human instrumentality project is a whole plan made by Seele, to combine everyone on Earth into one singular being. However, in order to do that, they need to make the third impact happen. In other words, this whole thing is happening as the third impact happened, meaning that everyone is fucking dead. So you know, yeah, that's cool to know. This now leads to the main characters being confronted by their personal issues and the way they've dealt with trauma. Masala is haunted by the guilt of losing her father, and she is not even sure that she's a good person or not, which leads to her thinking that she has built a persona that she isn't happy with. Asuka's desire for validation after being abandoned by her parents, but at the same time, said validation pushes people away and her lack of self-worth, and Rei's insecurities of losing a slimmer of her sense of identity. All of these combine to help explain the themes of escapism within the show, and to Shinji's arc in the show, as he himself is dealing with his own problems of feeling worthless. This transitions to the most notable part about the episode, the hand-drawn stuff. And sure, this could be seen as lazy budget cutting, but come on, some of y'all pretend like this shit doesn't even look good. I mean, look at this! It's so fucking cool! And now we're in a world where there's no Evas, and Shinji's living a normal life, with Asuka being his wacky childhood best friend, both of his parents being alive and supporting, and Rei being the new girl from school, until it suddenly cuts back to reality. This is where he realizes that maybe life isn't so bad, and even though that he still hates himself, he comes to realize that in the end, he can learn more about himself and become a kinder person, and wants to be himself. And after breaking his own world, the series ends with one simple word.
Congratulations! 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 Congratulations!
Congratulations.
Congratulations!
Congratulations!
Congratulations. Congratulations. Congratulations.
Congratulations!
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you all.
Boy, where do I begin? After going through a little series overview, it's safe to say that I absolutely love this anime. It's definitely a show that was ahead of its time, and to this day, it still needs to be a compelling and beautiful piece of media that will stand the times. Writing and the small character moments are masterfully crafted, mainly focusing on the main character's arc throughout the show with its very bizarre but unique imagery, expressing the passion and hard work that Hideaki Anno put into the series. Speaking of which, character arcs are something that this show does incredibly well. Seeing the character's story and struggles unfold throughout the beginning and the end of the show, or those two final episodes, are absolutely incredible, where Shinji finally comes to learn to love himself. So of course, anime fans hated both episode 24 and 25.
Yeah.